So I just moved into my new studio and wanted to walk you through what you need to record drums in order to go from this to this. So if you want to record drums, obviously you need to start with having a drum set. So we're going to start there and follow the signal chain all the way through until it hits your computer, including microphones, interfaces, software, plugins, and all that fun stuff. So to start off with, I'm using my Tama Superstar drum kit. So for my current drum setup, I'm working with a 14-inch brass snare drum. I have 10, 14, and 16-inch toms. And then I've got a 22 by 18 kick drum. These all just have Evans UV2 heads on the tops for the toms and then a Genera Dry for the snare. I've got the EMAD 2 on the kick. As far as the cymbals go, I have a blend of Zildjians and Sabians, starting with the K Zildjian hi-hats. I've got a K medium thin Dark Crash 18-inch, a Sabian Autograph Series 10-inch Splash, 21-inch K Projection Ride, which is a Concept Series ride from Zildjian 20-inch medium thin Crash, and then I've got a Sabian 17-inch China cymbal, AAX. So when you're recording drums, just like with any other instrument, you want to start out with the end in mind, meaning that you want to select, if you have the availability, drums and cymbal sets that would blend with the genre that you're recording in. For example, I primarily record in rock and pop genres and then do faster and heavier styles of music like punk rock and metal. So my kit is more indicative of that setup, meaning I have louder cymbals, lower tuned drums. I've got a brass snare drum that has that big kind of thwack to it. Now this is the opposite of, say, something like recording jazz, where you'd want thinner, probably more washy cymbals, higher tuned toms, maybe even smaller diameter toms, and a pared down kit. So always try and get the sound correct from the source first, because it doesn't matter what kind of microphone you're using. If you're recording on a drum set or using cymbals that don't work well with the genre you're recording for, no amount of processing is going to get that to sit right in the mix. So speaking of microphones, that's the next thing that you'll need in order to start recording drums, because the microphones are in essence what is capturing the sound of your drum set. So the microphone setup that I'm currently using to record, if we start with the overheads, I'm using the AKG C214s. These are just a cardioid version of their multi-pattern bigger brother, the 414s. For my snare top, I'm using a CAD Audio D89. This sounds like a Shure SM57, but it has more rejection of the cymbals and bleed around the kit, so it works really well. Shure SM57 on the bottom of the snare. I have the Sennheiser 421 on my rack tom, and then I'm also using the Shure SM57s on my two floor toms. And lastly, for the kick drum, I have the CAD Audio D88 for kick out, and then I have a Shure Beta 91 on the inside to pick up a little bit more of the beater attack. Now it's not completely necessary, but if you do have an extra mic or two to spare and a good sounding drum room, you can set up some drum room microphones that will capture a little bit more of the natural ambience of the drum kit. I have a few that I typically gravitate towards when I have those set up. So you can record drums with any number of microphones that you have at your availability. I actually have a free guide that I'll link in the description that shows you how to record with one to many microphones. However, if you're starting out, I would at least recommend having 4 microphones. That being said, those would be the kick, snare, and then a stereo pair of overheads. That allows you to isolate the kick and the snare, obviously, but also you get that stereo width with the 2 overheads, and that helps create a lot more space and natural ambience in the final mix. So now that we've covered microphones, let's talk about the third thing that you're going to need, and that's the XLR cables or microphone cables to connect these microphones into your recording interface. So with your microphone cables, you really just need 1 cable per microphone, and this is in order to run the signal from the microphone into your recording interface, which we're going to talk about next. And this just carries the signal into ultimately your recording software. So you can see here, each microphone gets its own individual input, which then goes into the computer and allows you to record. So let's talk about what I'm plugging these into here, and this is going to be number 4 on the list of what you're going to need to record drums. So the device that I'm plugging these all into is what's called an interface, and all this is a device that takes the acoustic energy captured by the microphones and translates it into a digital language that your computer can go ahead and understand. So something like what I'm using here is the Focusrite Claret 8 Pre, and this is a Thunderbolt interface that connects to your computer and gives you 8 inputs. Now I've also got this chained with what was my first recording interface for drums, which is a Sapphire Pro 40, also made by Focusrite. I actually have these linked via ADAT cable, which just means that I get full 8 channels out of each of these interfaces, meaning that I can record up to a total of 16 channels of microphones. So I mentioned that I have these two interfaces linked up via ADAT, which is just optical out from this lower interface going into the optical input of the top interface. And this is a great way to expand your inputs if you ever want to expand and get a second rack of mic preamps. You can just link these up pretty easily, provided that your main interface will take that kind of input. All right, so now that we have our drums being picked up by the microphones going through the mic cables into the interface, it's time to talk about the fifth and final thing that you'll need to record drums, and that's going to be your software. Now, your software can also be referred to as a DAW, or digital audio workstation, and I typically work out of Ableton Live, although I get sent a good amount of sessions in Pro Tools and Logic as well, so I'm very familiar with those programs also. But for the purposes of today's video, we're going to take a look at the session that I already have pulled up inside of Ableton Live. So I already have all of the inputs pre-routed into the software. So what we're gonna do now is do a quick level check, and all that really involves is setting the gain on your interface for each microphone to make sure that it's getting a strong enough signal, but it's not so loud that it's distorting. Honestly, the best way to do this is just to do a simple sound check. So have yourself or your drummer go ahead and just play behind the kit, hit record, and then if any of the levels look too low or too high, just adjust those accordingly. So now, having done the sound check, I've set all the gain levels appropriately on the interface. And these are all individually set just to have a good strong signal without clipping. So now let's take a look inside the session and hear what this all sounds like. So as you can see in the session, I just have one track per microphone here. I haven't done any real mixing on this other than just some level balancing and some panning on the overheads and toms here. And then I've inverted the phase on the snare bottom microphone. So I'll let you listen to what this sounds like so far. This is just all of the raw audio coming straight from the microphones into the interface. So pretty good sound so far, and I'll go ahead and step you through each one of these just so we can hear what they sound like from the source. So for my overheads here, if I put these at full volume, good clean sound from there. Got our kick-in microphone, providing more of the kind of thump and beater attack. Kick out, which gives a little bit more of that low end. Snare microphone on the top. Snare bottom, which captures more of that snare buzz. And then if we go over here to the toms, you can hear there is some bleed here. But pretty decent capture for those, and I just have those panned out. So full mix there with the overheads just at unity. So pretty good capture. I'm really happy with that so far. So as you can hopefully hear, you can get a really good capture just as long as you have a decently tuned drum set, good mic placement, the gain set appropriately, and then just doing a rough mix in your DAW. So with this, you can honestly rely mostly on stock plugins that are gonna come inside of your DAW to get a good sound out of this. However, if you wanna upgrade and get some third-party plugins, here's 3 that I would recommend just getting started with, particularly for drums that I use on a regular basis. So I'll just quickly let you hear some broad stroke level processing that I'm doing on the drums as a whole. So if I pull up my drum group here, you'll see that I have these 2 plugins on here. The first one is this BX Console SSL from Plugin Alliance. And really all I'm doing here is adding a little bit of a high shelf, taking out some of the low mids and giving a low boost, which you really hear around the kick drum. So here's what this sounds like on and off. Start with it off here. And then on. So that gives a little bit more definition, particularly in the high end, kind of cleans up some mids. Next, I'm using the Universal Audio API 2500 Plus compressor. This is probably my favorite compressor to use for drums just because this sounds really punchy with the settings that I have it on at the moment. If I turn this on here. You can hear it really grabs that snare and gives a real kind of punchy in your face sound. But the cool thing about this compressor is you can also change the tone and the detector mode, which gives you a little bit softer compression in there so you don't want it as hard hitting. And then lastly, I would recommend looking at some kind of a tape simulator. What I'm using here is the Universal Audio Studer A800. And basically what this does is gives you a little bit of tape saturation, rounds off some of the high end just because of the nature of tape, and gives a little bit of a low end bump depending on the IPS settings that you have here. So here's what this sounds like. So with those 3 extra plugins engaged, here's what the last part of this drum passage sounds like. So again, as long as you have the software to go ahead and record drums on your computer, you're going to be pretty well set in terms of plugins and everything that you would need to go ahead and get a good drum mix. However, looking into third-party plugins can be helpful just to have a few more tools in your toolkit. So there you have it. Those are the 5 things that you need to go ahead and get started recording drums. Just as a quick recap, those are your drums, microphones, mic cables, your interface, and your software. Please leave a comment down below if you have any questions, advice, or just want to talk recording drums. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the content. And also don't forget to download the free guide to recording drums with microphones that I have linked in the video description. So that's it for today. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Cheers. That's how to record drums. I feel like I could do that a little better. Wow, that's completely wrong. Accordingly, and once they come in, this is dumb. The first one was fine, just go with that. So, I'm just gonna be making a bunch of dumb poses. This is a waste of footage, so much waste. Delete everything from this again. So that's it for today. Thanks again for, what am I doing with my hands here? I don't know. That's the tape.